Good to see you too.
Before we get started too, I wanted to thank everybody for their well wishes and sympathies. It was very much appreciated.
You're welcome. And
Thanks.
Would
Sorry to have been absent for 3 months, but couldn't be helped.
We're glad to have you back with us.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay. That's good. Okay, we have 2 visitors online. We have Brian Frank and Andy Walls. Andy, can you introduce yourself, and you're going to speak tonight?
Yeah, briefly. I'm Andy Walls. I'm a resident of Roseville on Lake Owasso. I'm on the Lake Owasso Association board as well. And just wanted to comment on 2 things.
And Brian Frank, you're here for.
Yep, I'm Brian Frank. I'm a Samba Tech. I'm here representing the Lower Afton Apartments project.
All right. We'll call the meeting to order now that we have everybody here. And the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
I'll second.
Tina, can you call the roll?
Sure. Diane,
Aye.
Val.
Aye.
Cliff.
Aye.
Pam
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Second order of business is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, Tina, call the roll.
Okay, Diane,
Aye.
Val.
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Pam
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Next item on the agenda, visitor comments. And Andy, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah. I just first wanted to say thank you for the shoreline grant program that you're running on Lake Owasso right now. I'm not exactly sure where the funding comes from or why Lake Owasso was chosen, but speaking on behalf of the Lake Association, we appreciate it, and we're going to do everything we can to help spread the word and get residents to take advantage of it. I'm a stewardship grant participant myself, and it's been a good experience. So thank you for that. And then my second comment, last time I was here, there was some really great discussion about the Victoria Shores development that's proposed for the south end of Owasso, and it resulted in a letter from the board to the city of Roseville, which I wanted to say thanks for that too. I think it made a difference, and I just wanted to update you that the environmental assessment worksheet was ordered and was completed over the summer and submitted last month and deemed complete by the Roseville City Council last month. Though there was no discussion about at that step at all. It was published yesterday in the state EQB monitor, and it's now open for public and agency comment through November 4th. At which point the city will determine the need for an environmental impact statement, or they'll proceed with the project. And I understand that the district staff are going to comment, but I just wanted to say that if any of you were willing and able to comment as residents of the watershed or anyone you know, it would be great. And especially just considering the expertise you all have. I would just say that from my standpoint, when I read the EAW, it does not seem complete. Some of the issues that we discussed last time are omitted. It also draws conclusions about loons and bees that those of us who live here in the watershed know aren't true. It doesn't discuss impacts from boat traffic, riparian alteration, aquatic vegetation removal, things that we see homeowners do on the lake, on all the lakes in our watershed. And then it also states that the stormwater BMPs are designed to comply with your standards. The watershed is mentioned directly, but last I heard, they weren't compliant, and so it felt a little misleading to me. So, comments are really important because the city and developer are obligated to respond now, and the answers will be amended to the EAW, and they could result in the need for an EIS, which is a more rigorous process that could have more substantial effects on the outcome. So that's my appeal. If you're willing and able, we appreciate it. The EAW can easily be found on Roseville's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for your help. I know you and Paige have been communicating back and forth about how you can help with alerting the Owasso Lake residents as to their ability to participate in our stewardship program. So that's great. Thank you. And I appreciate the comments. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the permit program. Anything on that?
Yeah, for the enforcement report, I can answer any questions if you have them.
Anybody?
No.
Okay, we will deem that complete. Now the stewardship grant program. There's still a lot of money left in that. That's good, I guess.
Yeah, Paige is here to answer any questions if you have anything, that as well.
Yeah, we're still working on finalizing some designs for this year, some projects that want to get started. We're obviously getting a little near the end, but people are still trying to get things going. And then our Twin Lake projects, we did a lot of site prep and a controlled burn actually out there 2 weeks ago now, I think. And then they were able to seed, and then we'll do some plugs yet this fall. So that's going pretty well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Moving right along to action items. Watershed Excellence Awards approval. You sent out the awards to us. They sound great. I've seen a couple of comments. Do you want to lead this discussion, Tina?
Sure. Like you mentioned, there's the cover sheet is in the packet, and then I did send out the award recommendations to you via email. So if you wanted to give your comments that you sent back to me, maybe verbally now, so that that's on the record and not happening on email, that would be great. And then once, if these are approved as is, then they will go into our minutes so that the public, by the time the minutes are published in our next packet, they'll have been notified. So want to try and keep it a little bit of a secret until we can notify the award winnees.
Diane?
Yeah, my email comment for the record was that I'm always very impressed with the breadth and depth of the projects and commitment of people in the district. And it's always very interesting to find out some of the details. But I said that I supported the slate of award recipients that you proposed and was very impressed with it.
I would echo that to this as well.
Me too.
And me also. It was kind of fun to read the some of those stories. That there are people that are giving their all for the environment out there, and that's a good. So, do we have a motion to approve the recipients?
Award winners.
Well, yeah.
Also move. Also move.
A second.
Any further discussion? Can you call the roll?
Sure. Diane,
Aye.
Val.
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
and Larry.
I do have one question on this. Are we still going to hold this in person or are we?
That's still to be determined. It's likely going to be a virtual event, but we're still discussing that, the options there.
Okay. Now we have the district public art policy. Tina, this is yours to lead.
Yeah, yep. So and Paige helped me put some of this together too, as she researched some other watersheds and what they have listed for public art in their watershed. So as you know, as it said in the memo, there's been a few projects over the last several years that have come before the board. We felt that they were good projects. The board, approved them, but really what you would like, and we agree that it would be good to have some guidelines for when we would approve a public art projects and when we wouldn't. So we put together some goals and a mission and a process. Really the process is very similar to our stewardship grant process as it's written for public art, but the goals would be a little different to make sure that we're tying these public art projects to our stewardship grant projects and really making sure that they're tied to either outreach or real specifically to how a BMP functions even. For instance, making it interactive through an art piece that would help the public interact with the BMP. So those are the goals I have laid out here. I've included everything in the packet. So if there's questions, I'm open to the discussion that leads from it.
Questions from board members?
Yeah, I was curious, Tina, did you look back at what was done by the artists we employed back a while back to look at this issue?
Yeah, Christine Baumler's work. Yeah, I did. And I also, Christine Baumler is still a watershed artist in residence for Capital Region Watershed District, and they have put together some similar items. So some of the goals that I have written here came from her work with Cap Region as well.
Okay, great.
I was looking, Tina, I was looking at the amount and I was just curious if you could help me understand why that amount was the 50% to 15,000 was landed on. Was it based off of historical spend on the three you mentioned as examples? Just curious.
Paige, can you speak to that? What the other public art applications, if that's in the range?
Yeah, definitely in the range. I think the past, I'd have to look up for sure, but I think the most we've spent is like 8,000 or 9,000 on something. So yeah, definitely more than adequate, I believe, for anything that we would see. And I've gotten requests in the past for things that you guys haven't seen where we just know, like, this is not, it's not what we do. So just so you guys know, we have been sort of following this policy on our own. Like if someone just wants to put in an art piece that's not associated with a project or something. So I think this definitely falls in line with what we've been doing already and should be plenty for anything we would see. And again, if something comes where it's a larger amount that we think is beneficial, we would definitely bring that to you and have discussion on that.
Yeah, I would like to add that the mural that was done at the Maplewood Mall project was in the area of $50,000. But that again was a multi-million-dollar project. So I think there will be instances where we might want to deviate from the policy, but I think the way it's written is that the issue could be brought before the board. And the total for the annual budget is $50,000. So I can't imagine we'd have more than that in terms of requests. But I think it's possible that we could have a substantial project that is proposed at some point in the future, similar to the Maplewood Mall project.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Cliff. And I think in our heads, we were thinking of those maybe separate, at least I was. Haven't talked with Tina specifically about that, but like, for example, Aldrich Arena, we are hoping to do eventually some more signage and public art in there. So that would definitely be something larger scale like Maplewood Mall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would make a difference if it's in our associate with our own project versus somebody else
Oh, yes,
suggesting it
right.
as well. But
Yeah.
Pam has her hand up too, by the way, Larry, in the.
Well, there you go. Hi, Pam.
Oh, you're on mute, Pam.
Thank you, sorry. Yeah, thank you. I did have a few comments. One, the public art, you're having historically been on the board for like ever. I know that a zillion, but 15 years ago, Cliff may remember, we did do a lot of thinking about public art, and we did a lot of studies, and we really thought a lot about it, and we really came up with a good rationale for coming up with, like, every time we do a construction project, we should have this percent public art, and I think I still agree with that policy we came up with, and the studies show, and I think we found it has great public benefit. It has an enormous public benefit. And I also think that when I look at like when we have artisans come in to create art for us to help us educate or display or wherever it may be, I'm really amazed. Like, even like the awards by the glass sculptor, they're just amazing. So I'm just piping in to say I'm fully supportive. I think this is a really valuable and good thing for us to consider and to continue to support.
Diane?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I just would ask, now that you've got these goals set out, that for process, you set up the request like the other RBAs, that set up the goal and how this particular project hit one or more of the goals. And I think that will make nice documentation and also help us review it.
Sure. Yep, that makes sense.
Will we be able to predetermine when we start a project if we're going to have a public art part to it?
For our own projects,
Pardon?
for our district projects, or for
Right.
other?
Right.
Yeah, definitely, it's always on the table. I think, when we're looking at new projects going in, that's a consideration. We haven't done a lot of public art besides like good signage and having artistic signage, but that's always part of our projects.
And that was actually a question I had too. Is signage considered to be public art? Because I kind of think this public art is something a little different than signage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I did include some language around signage in here. But yeah, I do agree that it's different. I think when it's our own project, we include signage and we don't necessarily need to earmark it as public art. But if it's somebody else's project that's coming to us just for signage, I think it probably would fall under this category for a grant proposal.
Yeah, we have had a couple of requests in the past. Oh, sorry, Tina, for signage. And that's kind of fallen under our public arts. I don't want to call it a policy because we are just doing that now, but the standards we had before where we would look at that for projects, some smaller scale signs. And then Larry, kind of back to your question of if we know about art, let's say for stewardship grants, not necessarily our projects, usually the ones that we've had in the past, they ask up front if they could, like for example, Maplewood City Hall put in a big art piece that we helped fund 2 years ago. So we knew about that up front as something they were thinking about. So sometimes, usually we would in a stewardship grant case as well.
Yeah. I know we had it with Aldridge Arena too. There was that. I personally don't think of signage, even the beautiful kind of signage that I see explaining things as being public art. In my head is something a little bit different, but
I was gonna make a very similar comment, Larry. Like it seems like the panel pieces, the signage is just a nice outreach practice to do. And so when you think about the Boys and Girls Club, where they're asking for a very specific art piece to kind of bring things, that seems in my head to apply more so. And it'd be nice if we could just say, signage is just really good public outreach, and it has a different purpose than the art itself. And then we can just conserve that budget for really meaningful pieces like discussed in this conversation.
I agree. Okay, any further discussion? Tina, do you have enough to move ahead? Oh, I'm sorry, Tracy.
Yeah, that's all right, Larry. I just wanted to add, I really like how you did this policy, Tina. I know, Diane, in the past, you've had concerns, and really rightfully so. How does this tie to the statutory purpose under 103D.201, and tying it to a project which is fulfilling a purpose, and then showing an educational piece that will help promote that purpose? I think you've really tied it really well to the statute. So I really like how this has come out, and I'm glad the board likes it as well.
Thank you. So back to my question, Tina, do you have enough to put together the final policy for us to approve at the next meeting?
I think so. Paige, did you have any other thoughts or questions that you wanted?
No, I think that's, all I have.
Yep, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need a motion to move ahead, or are you okay with?
I'm okay. I'll just bring it back next month for you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the attorney report. And Tracy, we moved you guys up from the depths of the agenda to higher up, and so that you don't kind of, when we get to you, we don't go, oh my goodness sakes, here's another report. So it's over to you.
Because I know how interesting we can be anyway. So, Lauren's been working with Nicole on this issue. So this month, the hot issue was really looking at an applicant that needed to provide funds to the Storm Impact Fund. And maybe Nicole can speak more to it in a technical sense, or maybe you're all aware of it. But our office was working with Nicole to make sure that the steps were followed and the procedures were followed. And then under Rule C, the funding of the Storm Impact Fund was done correctly, and all steps were followed, and they were. So I don't know if I don't remember seeing that on the agenda for a vote, but I just wanted to at least let you know that was kind of our hot button this month.
Yeah, and I can provide background if you'd like. A permit was approved in 2018 for an apartment building in Maplewood. They proposed expanding on an existing filtration basin that was above ground, and then also constructing an underground stormwater reuse system. So construction commenced over the last few years, and they wrapped up the building project. They installed stormwater reuse. They did the grading and seeding of the filtration basin, but it's holding water and there's cattails. And we, the contractor tried to rebuild it, I think twice. And the engineer for the project said, this is a groundwater issue that we didn't anticipate. There's such a volume that, a liner is infeasible, and it's kind of seeping out of the side of the basin versus bubbling up from the top. So the engineer, after looking at it, essentially, said, I don't know what we can do here. So we said, well, either you come up with another way to fix the basin, or you have to kind of retroactively go back to our alternative compliance for stormwater treatment because they're short on their volume. So they looked at other places on the site to do a BMP, and because the site's built out, it's infeasible. There's a large parking lot now. And so we said the other option is that you pay into the Stormwater Impact Fund for the amount that you're short, because this basin doesn't function as you intended it to. So that's what they're opting to. I've been in contact with Shelley to see if the applicant would rather us utilize their remaining escrow, and then they would just pay what's left over. So just making sure that that works from an accounting standpoint, and then consulting with Gallowitz to make sure that our rules allow for this use of the Stormwater Impact Fund and their escrow. So yeah, if there's any questions, let me know.
And that's all in my report, unless there's specifics on this issue.
Cliff, did you have a comment?
I don't see why we couldn't use the escrow fund, as we just have to make sure from an accounting standpoint, we transfer it into the impact fund account. Yeah.
Yeah, because then that money would be used within the Coleman Creek subwatershed for the district to construct a future project.
Yeah.
So it's a bummer that it didn't work out as we hoped, but they do have their stormwater reuse system in place, and the basin, even though it's full of cattails, provides a flood control, rate attenuation benefit. So they're just going to have to manage the vegetation in that basin.
It also shows the benefit of having the Stormwater Impact Fund set up, because if we didn't have that, really there wouldn't have been a lot of options for them to be able to provide the treatment. So in this case, we'll get the dollars where we'll provide the treatment, but it was nice that that was set up so we could move forward with that.
Good job. Very good job. Okay, moving on. Item number 9, West Fadness
I
Lake.
think, sorry, Diane.
Diane has her
has a
hand up.
comment.
Yeah, I didn't have a question about that project, but just really glad that you had alternatives set up and we have a way to manage it. My question was for Tracy. At our last meeting, Lorianne told us all of the perturbations of the open meeting law that were going on, and I just wondered if there's anything new on how all of your clients or other agencies are handling this in-between period we're in.
It's just as varied as last month. I think more and more people are going to remote again. I have sad news on a person we use quite often as an appraiser for the district. Anytime we obtained easements, he was vaccinated in a breakthrough case and died yesterday of COVID. So yeah, I'm just sad about it personally. And so I think people, it stayed the same. So Larry, it's really up to you. It's your call on what should happen. And what we're seeing is I think more people are pulling back.
Mm-hmm.
But Lauren is our resident expert. So if you need something more about that, I'll have her report back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Diane.
That's why we made the decision here, is because, I watched some of the other government organizations around and they've all pulled back. So it makes sense for us to continue this way, at least for a while, until things change or don't change, depends.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird world we live in.
Yeah.
Okay, next thing is board issues. I put West Fadness Lake strategy and status on there. We haven't talked about West Fadness Lake. We've been doing a lot of work over there. I know we've worked with them on carp count. We've put lake level monitors in. A lot of stuff is going over there. I also have to say, from my point of view, every time I try to explain the watershed to people, I have a hard time dealing with the fact that West Fadness Lake is not in our watershed, since it's right in the middle of our flow and it's the foot of their flow. So start out with Tina. Were you able to get an update from them, what their plans are with this?
Yeah, I met with Phil Belfiore, who's their administrator, yesterday afternoon, and we had a nice chat. And I'll just start out by saying he did offer to come to a board meeting if you're wanting to have more discussions with him directly as a board. He said he'd be happy to come and attend a meeting and talk with you about all this too. They've been doing a lot over the last year or 9 months or so with West Fadness. As Larry mentioned, they've partnered with us both through staff time and financially on carp management and the carp barrier from West Vadnais Lake. Their board also approved an increase in their budget for 2022 to continue to do rough fish management. So not only carp, but other rough fish that might be contributing to water quality concerns in West Vadnais. And so besides contributing those funds to actually do the work in 2022, they've also planned to do a fish survey, a full fish survey on West Vadnais Lake, so they understand besides carp, we did a carp survey, but besides carp, which other fish are contributing to that lake system. So that's being planned for 2022, and Vlamo will be doing that work. And then coordinating with us in Carp Solutions on rough fish management in that system. They're at the final stages of completing a sustainable lake management report for West Vadnais Lake. And basically it's an SLMR report, is a predecessor to a TMDL. The TMDL is not scheduled with the PCA until 2024. There was some discussion about whether or not they could push that up. The PCA, for their staffing reasons, want to keep it at 2024, which really is okay for the TMDL report itself. Doesn't really, that's an exercise that the state is required to go through. But really the work that they've done in this SLMR that will feed into that report, kind of takes all the data, all the information they know about West Vadnais. So they did a vegetation and macrophyte survey in 2021 for that report. They did a bathymetry survey also for that report. And then it also talks about then their steps for looking at internal load management on that lake, which is what they're deeming is the most important water quality concern, is the internal load from West Vadnais. And so that's the work with carp and rough fish as the first step in that process. And then they're definitely open to what's next after that and talking through what other internal load management solutions they can come up with. So, the message I got from Phil was they're committed, they're partnering with us, they have been actively partnering with us and plan to continue to do that. And really are taking action steps. It's not just words. That report is available on their website. It's kind of buried right now because it's in their technical advisory committee agenda for this week, and then it will be on their board agenda. But I can send you a link to that so that you can have a direct connection to that as well, so you can take a look at it. We're also I asked Brad and Aaron to take a look at that SLMR to just make sure that it reads the way that we would anticipate it to read, as far as how the lake receives its water, the outflows. They took a lot of the information from our EAW that we did for the lowering of the outlet and the carp report. They took a lot of information from us, but just making sure that that the action items kind of fall in line with what we would anticipate for that system as well. Do that.
Comments? Diana?
Yeah, we've discussed it before, and I've never understood why this lake, which is in our flow path, our watershed, is in another one. And I wondered if it was because they didn't have the study that east and west weren't connected. There's got to be some history. And there wasn't an outlet originally, whatever. It still doesn't make sense to me. I'm really glad that they're working with us. That's great, but it just doesn't make sense. I'd like some more information about why this came about this way and whether it should stay that way.
Well, at one point in time, West and East Vadnais were one lake, historically.
Yeah.
And then we didn't have the Grass Lake area until 2012. So
Right.
there's a lot of reasons why political boundaries are drawn in a way that they are. I don't know, Cliff, if you have any other
Yeah.
background that you want to share
Well,
on that.
I mean, from way back when our boundaries were established for Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District, all of West Vadnais and East Vadnais was incorporated into the, well, East Vadnais was incorporated into the St. Paul Water Utility System. West Vadnais was basically landlocked for years and years until the low flow system was set up when Unweave the Weave was completed. There was no outlet for West Vadnais, so it was isolated. It didn't flow into our district. It had no influence. So there's no reason to change the boundary at that point. After the low flow system was established, there was some reason to incorporate it, but it's only 4 CFS at a maximum flow that was coming in, and nobody felt it was important enough to add West Vadnais into our boundary to make that change. And then we assimilated Grass Lake WMO, and it became a little bit more important after we did the studies showing the water flow direction. But then we're basically at the current time when we suggested that to Vadnais Lake WMO, and at that point they weren't real keen on the idea of making the change, and it didn't matter anyway because we were accounting for its flow and doing the adjustments needed to manage that activity. And then they offered to do the TMDL for West Vadnais, so I think it was a good reason to just leave it alone and let them deal with that part of it. So I mean, definitely it from a technical standpoint, it would make more sense to have it part of our district, but I think we're managing all the effects of West Vadnais, so I don't think it matters at this point. Frankly, there are a number of watershed districts around the state and the metro where smaller systems like this aren't actually reflected in their exact boundaries, but as long as the two watershed districts collaborate and are working together to identify and analyze and resolve the problems, I think it works fine the way it is. I don't know if that helps.
I do appreciate it, Cliff. I honestly have a lot of questions on the history there, and I'm just curious, as we look to improving conveyance across our watershed, what steps would we take, or what would change your minds with respect to inclusion of West Vadnais in our watershed? I mean, is it time to making decisions? Like, what is our goal? I assume is quality, conveyance, all those pieces.
Yeah.
Would it be easier for us, like our time to action would be shorter if they're in our watershed? What's y'all's opinion?
I think that if there was a major capital improvement needed, I think that would be the catalyst to make a change. If with our larger tax base, if there was a major capital improvement that comes out of the TMDL, for example, then I think it would be a reason to pursue it. If West Vadnais, or if Vadnais Lake WMO saw the continued expense of dealing with West Vadnais as a burden to them, they may push it. But I think it would be one of those actions that would be a catalyst to making a change. We could either request it or they could push it. But I don't think there's a reason to push it right now, personally.
Okay, but when we get into issues like the Owasso Basin bypass and those kind of things, come up with West Vadnais, because the last time when we tried to lower the outlet of the 15-inch pipe 8A6, we went through a long process of months of trying to get permission to do that fairly simple thing.
Right, right.
Get water from one area to the other.
That was the EAW process, not Lamo's process. That was.
Right, yeah.
And well, it was that, but Ramo only meets 6 times a year. They meet every other month. So if you get to a point, there's a lot of waiting that takes place, or that only meets every other month.
Yeah.
So it can restrict our ability to move quickly with the projects we want to find in the watershed.
I think if we saw an advantage to making the change and we pushed it hard and Blamo didn't fight us, we could effectively make that change in about 3 or 4 months. So I think if we keep that in mind, I think when it becomes practical and important, I think we could move pretty quickly.
I saw Pam had her hand up for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pam. Thank you. Oh, yeah, there you are.
Thanks. Yeah, so I just wanted to pipe in. I agree with what Cliff has said, and he's been around for a long time, has really had, thought about this. And I just want to pipe in that in addition to that, we did years ago with a prior board really discuss this option. And I just want to pipe in some things that I remember that we talked about that were concerning. And one that, it's this complicated system where river water is piped in, and then East Vadnais is the drinking water, and West Vadnais is super dirty. And just that, to be wary that this is a really complicated system, and all the people involved with trying to take care of it is complicated. And if we were to consider as a board to take this on, it would be a complicated thing with a lot of problems. And not that we couldn't, but I just wanted to just pipe that in.
I think when we talked about it before in 2019, it turns out, we did talk about the fact that the lake needed to be cleaned up. It needed to be understood a little bit better because it was an essential part of our flow system. Then it became an essential part of our water flow control system, getting the water out of Owasso on down. And do we know exactly what steps we would have to go through to move this over to us if that comes up at this point? I think.
Yeah.
It's only 3 months, I guess we can.
Yeah, so a boundary change, we've gone through that a number of times. Typically just to clean up boundaries or other watersheds will initiate it. One thing to keep in mind is that the controls on West Vadnais for water controls for West Vadnais Lake are actually in our district. So the outlet, everything in that wetland, that's all in our district. And so we have control over the water flow systems, both what's coming in and what's going out of West Vadnais. So from a water quantity perspective, I'm not sure there would be a lot more that we would be able to control by having it in our district. But water quality, now I know that's a concern as well. And that's where, they've taken steps with us to address that. So the comment that Phil made to me was before we would go down the road of a boundary change, he would just want to have a discussion with you all together just to find out what you would want them to do more of. Let's talk about that before, because they're willing to do that. And I don't know exactly their history of why they really don't want that boundary change to happen, but that's something I guess we could discuss with him as well.
Last time we had this discussion, I recall that it was sort of a historical thing that the Vadnais Lakes would become Vadnais Lake And that seemed to be that they didn't want to have that happen. But from an operational point of view, we're the ones that take all the dirty water and send it downstream and have to hopefully get it cleaned up and to manage the flow through there. There's still some things like the outlet to the culvert that goes under, I think it's E9, it goes under Rice Street. You have to get into West Vadnais to clear it up and make sure the water can flow out of there properly. When it gets down to the bottom, you have to make sure that's all cleaned up so it can go through the, just to get out.
Yeah, and some of that work is with the county too. So like when we've cleaned out
Yeah.
that outlet to West Vadnais, that was a county permit for right-of-way permit. And, you know, again, we didn't have any obstacles to being able to get in there and do that work. Or when we armored the south end of West Vadnais Lake, again, those are county or city permit requirements. We didn't have to go through Vlamo's process for any reason on those as well. But yeah, I definitely understand your comments and concern. It is a unique situation to have that.
Yeah, and normally, and I know we had this discussion before, and it's not that everybody doesn't get along, it's just the fact of reactivity time more than anything else, and making sure that the water is of the quality that we're working so hard to get downstream. Why don't we have Phil come to the next board meeting then, and we can have a discussion.
Well, sure. I'll see if he is available for the next one, or maybe in December if November doesn't work.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
I was just going to speak as a constituent instead of a board member. I do recall from a community perspective, it being difficult to understand who's best suited to help in this particular location. So as they look at these low-lying residents with the estates near us, as long as our time to decision and time to action can be as short as possible in case something happens, I think that's really where I feel strongly about would decide should we include it or not. And that's just my 2 cents on that.
Good point.
Diane, you had a comment?
Yeah, I really appreciated Cliff's outline of the history, which, you know, things have changed. And I also appreciate that from the technical sense, it makes more sense for it to be in our watershed. To me, it's more a question of timing. I prefer not to wait until we have a big need to discuss it and settle the issue and work out the details. But let's find out some more information and then figure out if we want to be proactive or reactive.
Well, why don't we raise that issue with Phil when he comes to our meeting?
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Very good. And you can tell we're all basically nice people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'll tell him that we want to talk about, you know, their action and the actions that we'll take in the next year or so, but also discuss the boundary issue concerns and questions, and we can get his perspective from that. And Pam has
Larry, Larry, I have one more point I forgot, and I just thought it's important to consider too, is another thing is, again, I'm not opposed to this, but another thing to consider is it's such a dirty lake. It's taking on such a huge, expensive thing to fix. And the benefit to the community is broader than our watershed district. And having our watershed district citizens pay for it is something to consider. And so I just want to put that into something to think about too, is that, well, if we're going to take this on, we should have partners in taking it on so that the expense of paying for it is distributed amongst all those who will benefit. For example, all of those people who drink East Vadnais Lake water.
No.
I just wanted to add that too. I forgot to add that earlier.
Yeah, let's be real, at least from my point of view, let's be clear. I'm not interested in taking over East Vadnais Lake.
No.
Talking about West Vadnais Lake here.
Okay.
which is, as I recall from all the reports, is in pretty crummy shape. East Vadnais Lake is pristine. It's one of the best lakes in the state, because the people in St. Paul have to drink it. That, as far as I'm concerned, would stay. That's basically St. Paul Water Authority anyway, that I think.
Yeah, if we took on East Vadnais, you would actually have all of Lamo, because all of Lamo comes through that area.
Yeah, it does.
So let's be clear.
No, I was just saying taking on West Vadnais takes on all of that too, because they're interrelated, and that's what I'm trying to say. And if we were to do something to take on more to deal with West Vadnais, the benefit to the public would exceed our watershed district. And that's my only point, is just to recognize that. And when we think about paying for these things, to keep that in mind. That's the only point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah. Okay. Because we're not getting a new tax base from it. We're just trying to get better control for our citizens in our watershed district from this. I think there are only just a couple of houses that actually on West Vadnais. They're right along Rice Street, I think it is. Yeah. So that's not, as I recall in the discussion before, and we can ask Phil about this, is that there's a little wetlands up at the head of this that kind of is the top, because they were worried about that when we were bringing down the water.
Yeah. On the north end, that's pretty much the whole drainage area is on that north end and on the west side of the lake a little bit.
Right. All right. So let's get him in and talk with him and see what.
Yeah, Diane has her hand up as well.
Just a couple things before Phil comes. Could you share with Val and maybe recirculate the report that was done about the study of the connectiveness between east and west? Because that makes a huge difference. My understanding was they're not connected, but I can't remember all the details of the report. Sure. And then the other thing is we've put a lot of money into West Vadnais over the last few years. If you could just give us a list of the things we've done. We've worked on the berm, we've dug out the outflow area a few times, lowered the outlet, worked on tons of stuff. So maybe we could take a look at that. And my concern always has been and continues to be the water quality and its impact on our water downstream and whether we can move fast enough. It seemed to me we've moved slower to get that cleaned up than we would have if it had been ours. But I look forward to finding out more.
And sorry to add one more thing, Tina, it's not my intent to give you a ton of work, but when we make process decisions, at least in my current job, we build a value stream map to figure out the speed from point A to point B. Is there any way that you could just, like, if we had a water conveyance problem, what decisions we'd have to make to get from point A to point B versus a quality problem? Do we have that written down somewhere?
Well, I'm not sure we have it written down the way that you're asking about, but I think we can use examples over the last several years of where we've done projects.
That would be helpful. Yeah, that and that would be just trying to mentally establish a baseline in my head on that series of events. Yeah.
We can do a little history reminder on how all that transpired over the last several years. I think too, just like with water quality, I'll just mention, so even if West Vadnais was ours, it might not be the #1 priority for us for water quality, or it might not fall into the priority as far as, well, especially when it's internal load management. As you know, we've done a lot of external load management for Bennett and Wakefield, who are 2 impaired waters. West Vadnais would be our 3rd. So we typically would address external load first and then move to internal load. In this case, we don't have a lot of external load areas even to consider. So we'd be moving to internal load, and yes, it would tie in with all our discussions that we'll be having in the near future about Wakefield and Bennett Lake as well. But I think, you know, even without it being in our watershed, we can put it in the mix with those other two lakes. It would be a very similar process to determine how we would manage internal load. And I think somewhat to Pam's point, if Lamo still owns West Vadnais and we come forward and say, well, this is what we think needs to happen next with West Vadnais, we probably would have a 50-50 share instead of it being our sole responsibility. So that's something to consider as well.
Good. Okay, so we'll get Glenn and have a good discussion with him.
Sounds good. Yep.
Discussion, thank you. Okay, next we're on to presentations. First one is the Grass Lake Berm Wetland Mitigation Overview.
Brad's going to
Right.
walk us through this discussion. Yep.
Yep, thanks, Tina. Thanks, Larry. I'm going to try to share my screen here and walk through the presentation that, make sure I have the right one up. And let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
All right. This presentation is also in the board packet, so hopefully you had a chance to walk through it. And I'll just hit the highlights of the slides. The reason for giving this at this time, at least one, maybe two board members had an interest after the last meeting in reading the project status report and said, it seems like we have a lot of stuff going on in this small area next to Grass Lake. We should learn more about this. And I think this is very timely too. Just, it's almost like a case study in preparation for the Wetland Workshop coming up on the 25th. As you know, we did the work back in 2018 in raising the berm that's on the north side of Grass Lake. Of course, there are wetlands in the area, and those wetlands were impacted by the raising of that berm because the side slopes of the berm actually extended into small portions of that wetland. And when you impact wetlands, and Nicole can jump in here as well as somebody who is part of the regulatory process in these types of things, it triggers a couple of things. You know, the Wetland Conservation Act, kind of the state rules around impacts to wetlands, first says you have to go through a process that shows that the impacts you are making are unavoidable. Basically, you show you've tried a couple of different scenarios and you have impacts and you've minimized those impacts. So you get to that justification process, and then the amount of acreage or the size of the wetlands you're impacting has to be replaced in some fashion. And in this case, in this area, and in most areas that we would be involved with in the metro area, it's a 2-to-1 ratio of replacement to impact area. So that's what we start with. And then the other part that kind of works into here, the district, we have our own no net loss policy, no net loss of wetlands in the district. And so that really affects that first 1-to-1 ratio of wetlands to basically say, okay, if we're going to fill wetlands or we're going to impact them, we have to keep at least that much wetland area in the same general vicinity. And Nicole and Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that means ideally as a part of that project area, but if you can't find the appropriate location in the project area, at least has to be in that watershed area, not the district area, but the watershed area. So you have to have it close to home, basically. So those are the two things we were dealing with in this particular situation. We did show there was an unavoidable impact of 4,294 square feet. And we went ahead and purchased 4,704 square feet from a wetland bank that was outside the district, but still falling within that 1-to-1 no net loss policy within the district. 5,178 square feet was designed for wetland creation as a part of this this project. When you create wetland area, you get 75% credit. That's why the numbers don't add up to a perfect one-to-one. But we can go to the next slide here and kind of look at the site to kind of reorient everyone to where this occurred. There's Ramsey Road up here on the north, and you can see the pedestrian trail as it winds through here. And the blue areas, there are 3 large ones that were delineated as part of the project, show the wetland boundaries. And you can see where the pedestrian trail was, and you can remember from the work that we did in that area that the berm is really just south of there. So you can see how it starts to squeeze into some of these wetland areas and the need for impact in those areas. Excuse me, when we look for a replacement area in this vicinity, this little peninsula over close to where the overflow was a prime location for doing the replacement. So this is that peninsula. It's kind of turned a little bit on this sheet. So you can see the north arrow. But basically there was an excavation area that was planned away on the far tip of it, a portion of it in the center of it. And then this area over here, and hopefully you can see my cursor as I'm showing this, shows where the pathway is and the overflow. But the area on the downstream side of that overflow was also planned as wetland creation area. So those 3 areas made up that 5,178 square feet or so. When you do a wetland mitigation plan, you're committing not only to building this and creating it and setting it up for success, you have to monitor and manage this for up to 5 years. And so each year there's basically an inspection report. There's maintenance that's done during that time frame. There's evaluation of whether you're making the progress that you expected on this. You do that annually. And so if it goes really well, you're done in 3 years oftentimes, but you plan for 5 years of that. And then these areas have to be recorded. And so they are established on a permanent basis, so they're not impacted by another project in the future. So you're really putting those restrictions and covenants on the areas that you're building. And you are committing to making sure that that vegetation is there for the long term. So the initial work, again, these areas were created back in 2018, excavated, seeded. And at that time, we had Minnesota Native Landscapes under contract to do the initial vegetation management. But if you recall, during that time frame, we built the berm, we raised the berm up. The overflow was experiencing a lot of flooding. It was continually flowing over the path because of high water. And so the area on the downstream side, if you recall, started to scour out. We had turf reinforcement mat planned in that area, and it was installed. But the only way that mat really works is if you get good vegetation establishment first before you start pouring water over it, especially continual flows over that. So it didn't hold up very well, and that's when we went back in and we had to put riprap in there and basically stabilize the area. Otherwise, we were at risk of losing the whole path from washing out. And so this was really right in that southernmost wetland creation area. So we knew we were kind of sacrificing that, but it was in exchange for saving the path and keeping the path from washing out from that continual flow over it. So after the water went back down earlier this year, we removed the rock and reestablished vegetation in that area. So that area was stabilized, the rock was removed, the vegetation, things started to grow in the area. And then the technical evaluation panel, that's the body that kind of sees this process and makes sure that things get established the way you had planned, met on site and basically had some initial findings, concerns about how things were developing, and especially since the water levels had changed so much from when this was permitted several years ago. So oftentimes what we do, we put in these, again, monitoring wells, piezometers, excuse me. And so we installed monitoring wells in those areas so we could justify that there is in fact hydrology that's going to allow for this wetland to be created. And then the recommendation was, well, it's kind of late in the season, we should overseed the area with dormant seed to try to get some of these thin areas to come back in at a much more dense pace and improve the density of the area. And then also to confirm, what is the square footage that was actually built and how did that square footage compare to what was planned? So those are some of the things, as you saw the project status report the last couple of months, those are some of the things that have been happening. And these are more of the specifics around that. And this is on Ramsey County property. And we had to go through the process of getting a long-term access agreement to this. But, we were also updating in the project status report the effort that we were going through around that. And we did get that. Reasonably timely manner, and we do have that access agreement in place for the long term. So we're set there, and we began with the installation of these wells in August of 2021. Surveying, putting data loggers in the wells too, so we can kind of monitor how the hydrology is situated, and just setting this up for the longer term monitoring and management that's necessary. So this is just a couple of pictures of the same site, just at different times. The overflow swale, the path that many of you are familiar with, probably have walked it even this year. Larry, I know you've been out there a number of times. This is just looking on the downstream side. And of course, that rock was removed from this area. And this stabilization material is in place. And it's really this area that I think we've got the most attention on right now, because there is virtually no wetland vegetation coming in. And when it was graded out, it was graded a bit higher than the original construction that we had planned and had done to create wetland in the area. So just a couple of issues there. And when we look at this from an aerial photo standpoint, that north area, again, we had planned 2,132 square feet to be created in this area. We actually have slightly more than that is starting to establish, although it's quite thin. And in the central area, which is down in this spot here, we had planned 1,245 square feet, and quite a bit larger than what we had planned. So I guess that's the good news. I think we're off to a good start, although again, they need some overseeding, and I'll show some photos of that. But this area that is down here, just downstream of the overflow, we had planned 1,803 square feet, and virtually there's nothing that could be counted as wetland mitigation area at this point. So we're about 1,000 square feet short from a mitigation standpoint. When we look at the areas that are establishing, you can see a lot of good happening here, but also some very thin areas as well. You've got native rushes and grasses, sedges, and things that are coming up. But as you can see in some of these other areas, a lot of thin spots. And this area in particular shows the lack of density here. Not necessarily uncommon, especially with how dry it's been this year. So we just have to work on these areas a bit more, getting the seed down and getting things established and making sure it has the the water that we expected. You know, some of the recommendations, Tina, is the Minnesota Native Landscapes. I know we were working with them on a general maintenance contract. Is that what we had talked about, you know, extending that over to this area, using them to, you know, I know at one point we talked about having district staff do some of the maintenance, and then we looked at Minnesota Native Landscapes. Where are we at with that now?
Yeah, I believe we're gonna include them in their contract page. I don't know if you have any, if you're still on here.
Yes, Minnesota Native is on our contract, so we have them for the next, well, this year, next year, and then we'll reassess if we want them to do it or add it to somebody else.
But as you can see, well, go ahead, Pam.
Sorry, Brett, I have a question. So I'm just wondering, it seems like what you described as you went in and there's this area of what you thought was wetland and planted all these seeds. I could be wrong, but it seems like it was too upland for the seeds and they didn't grow well, and more upland seeds might have been better. And I could be wrong here, but I'm just wondering if we're considering this, and also this area is super fluctuating, like it's flooded for 3 years and then it's dry for a decade, and to consider the seeds that could accommodate that fluctuation. So my question is, are we considering that fluctuation and planting appropriate seeds? And I have no problem with continuing to work with Minnesota Native Landscapes, but to have some coordination in what's the appropriate seed to lay in the appropriate height or depth.
I'll just say, yes, that is something that would be considered as we gather data through the data loggers. You know, some of the seed that's put down, you know, basically depending on the situation it's in, will establish itself on its own, and the other that may need more water or less water wouldn't establish itself. So we would continue to overseed to make sure that it had the variety of native plants that would thrive in the specific situation that we have here. So I guess short answer is yes, we will look for that. Do that. So
Thanks,
I
Brett.
guess, yep. Just to wrap this up, you know, we'll continue to monitor it as we are required to do. And we have to make a decision on what specifically we want to do about that 1,000 square feet that is, you know, no longer available to us. We could excavate a small area to try to reestablish that. You know, I think we could work on some areas adjacent to it or where it had been planned originally, but it might make the most sense just to purchase that 1,000 square feet from Wetland Bank and move on, because I believe we're still within the 1-to-1 requirement that the district has for no net loss. But you know, I think those decisions are here in the near future as we get to the end of this first monitoring season. Anything to add, Nicole? I know you've been involved with this as well.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really good job explaining, and you know, I haven't. It's a little awkward because we're permitting ourselves, so I haven't gone through a replacement plan that had to be amended, like to go back and say, you know, we need to actually purchase more credits. So, you know, maybe if we look at the upland buffer, does that get us to the 2-to-1, or are we still short? I was unclear about that for WACA. So it's like we have to meet WACA, but then we also have our no net loss policy, which in a lot of ways is more stringent. And this is something we can talk about at the workshop, but I think this is a good example that wetland creation is hard, you know, and we see applicants come in, and we have our no net loss policy that in recent years has been fairly inflexible, which I don't have a opinion on it one way or the other, but it's something to think about when we want to walk the walk with our own rules of what we hold other applicants to, but it's really complicated to create some of these systems. I think that, as Brad mentioned, there's some options, but we just need to figure out, what way we want to go and how that affects, the policies moving forward. But that could be a larger discussion for like, the Wetlands Workshop or something, but. Pam?
Can I pipe up on a tangential? It's just, I've brought this up many, many times in the past, and it concerns me that we don't like really have any places anymore to put wetlands, and we're buying credits outside of our watershed district. And the more we redevelop and become more and more impervious, it's very concerning to me that this process of buying credits outside of the watershed district is going to be a disservice to us over time. And so I'm hopeful that our district staff and managers can be on board with keeping an eye out for opportunities to just find places to redevelop in our own watershed district that could be banked credits for something like this in the future. And maybe we just buy it ourselves and just to keep our treatment and, keep our place cleaner.
Yeah, I think that's definitely will be part of our workshop discussion as well. There's kind of two different ways to look at that. We can have what we would call credits for wetland, restoring previously drained, or, finding, it's really hard to create wetland in areas that have never been wetland like that's, but if we can find areas that need to be or can be restored, if they've lost their hydrology over time because of development or other factors, we might not technically have Bowser credits for that, but we could have district credits that we could apply towards our projects or other projects as well.
And just pipe into remember. Exactly. And remember, south of, what's it called? Ames Lake, south of Phelan, where we took that old shopping mall and lifted it up, and all of the old wetland vegetation was still there. And all we did is remove the parking lot and all those buildings, and it became a wetland again. Yeah. So opportunity, I know those are far and few between, but that's serves as an example of how it can be done.
Right.
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing would be if, just focus on meeting the WACA requirements. And if that includes, upland buffer areas and we can get there, then it might be easier. If we're willing to make an exception to the no net loss policy. Yeah, that's all options, but or we can just see if we can get some hydrology and vegetation in that swale. Ben from Bowser, who we hope is going to be able to attend the Wetlands Workshop, he wasn't devoid of optimism, I'll say that, for that area. So, I don't really have a preferred direction, I guess. I am kind of on the regulatory side of this one. So
I think in general, purchasing credits is always like our last shot. I think we should, continue to explore options to make it work on site. And then whether that's through upland buffer or, trying to excavate for more hydrology. And then if we're to a point where this just is not most beneficial for the wetland or for this project, then credits, it was really our last resort.
I will say we have a unique, I guess, complication in that we don't own this property. Usually applicants that are replacing wetlands, that are replacing on site, own the property, so they can do the maintenance and the regrading without much effort and monitoring and all that. So it's a little bit unique.
Cliff has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just trying to think in terms of how we would deal with a permit applicant if they were in this situation. I don't
question.
think, I
don't
don't think we would be very positive toward them just saying, oh, I want to purchase more credits, or I want to use upland buffer credits. I think we would want him to establish the wetland. So I think we should pursue that option, at least make more attempt. And I think the biggest problem with the overflow swale area is that it wasn't graded low enough. So I know it destroys a lot of the vegetation that's coming in there, but I know it's not terrific the way it is. So I think we should pursue that. Dig it down far enough where we can be assured that there will be more near surface hydrology, and replant it. It's expensive, but I think that would be what we'd expect out of a permit applicant. So that would be my preferred option.
And we could also, because I can't remember, was there a well or like a monitoring setup in the overflow swale? Because
No, not.
we could.
There's not yet, no, just
Okay.
because there wasn't anything there, but
Yeah.
you know, if that's necessary, they're not that difficult to put in. So.
I have a question. As the area resets itself, as rainfall gets back to normal and actually below normal, when we raise the berm, my understanding at that point, we raised the berm back to its design height. So we were kind of going back to where it should have been to protect Grass Lake. Now, has Grass Lake dried up enough so that it's got the same problem we do on the other side of the road? Are we still actually impacting wetland? So with the berm we put in, that's more where, and I suppose once you've been designated a wetland destroyer, there's not much you can do about it. But it seems like on the south side and the north side, there's kind of a balance that's taking place. You can't get the grass to grow on the north side of the berm because it's too dry. Does that mean that the south side of the berm doesn't qualify as a wetland anymore?
I'm not sure I completely followed your question, but I mean, the wetland impact wasn't just, so the wetland area is not defined just by how much water is in that system, right? It's a long-term qualification of what makes a wetland. And so when we built that berm to manage the overflow and the high water levels, we didn't impact the normal water level. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but we didn't want to have impacted the normal water level of the wetlands. We just impacted when that overflow would occur from grass into those wetland areas that we're discussing now. But the wetlands were there much longer than just this wet period, right? So there's been wetland established there far before that. And they have hydrology both from underground and overflow.
Yeah, and WACA has a very narrow definition of impact. You know, it's fill or excavation. So that's what the replacement plan was based off of, that square footage area from our construction activity.
And the lack of wetland establishment is more about hydrology than, I mean, we can get different vegetation to grow, but if you want wetland vegetation, you need to have wetland hydrology present.
Yeah,
well.
it takes soils, hydrology, and vegetation, and two of those parameters can establish a wetland. So just because it's been dry, it probably take over a decade of dry weather to actually alter whether or not it still is a wetland. So it takes a long period of time.
Diane, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions to understand it better, and then to comment on the recommendations. I appreciate you saying, Brad, that there's a number of wetlands because our website says Grass Lake's a 16-acre wetland. Well, I don't know what that is. Maybe that's the middle of the lake area or something, but do we have any kind of a map of all of the wetland areas of Grass Lake? And can we put that on the website when they finish it up?
Our wetlands are mapped and they are on our website. They're on the interactive website, our interactive map.
Okay, I'm going
yeah.
deep enough then.
Yeah, and the map, just to be clear about how that mapping happens, that is mostly based on aerial photo interpretation of wetland area. So it's not delineated wetlands, it's aerial photo.
And
and what we showed on the figure in the slideshow was a delineated. So it went through the process of checking for soils, vegetation, and hydrology, and to establish that line was surveyed. So, and that's what we require of permit applicants when they be close to a wetland that where it appears is going to be an impact.
And I agree with Cliff and Pam. I want to avoid having use credits. And it seems to me like you've got some options. This really is not a very big area. So I'm hoping you can work those options. The question I had though in your recommendations was about excavating the overflow swale. I can't remember from the past, but I thought we had it at that elevation to save Rice Street, or is that not the case?
The excavation of the overflow swale would just be further to the north from where the control point is at. And so it that area that was shown that was basically had the path and the blocks and then the green grass, it's really where that green area was at, lowering that area enough so you would have the hydrology that's necessary to establish the wetland vegetation. When it got reestablished, the rocks were pulled out. It got reestablished this summer. It was graded smooth. It looks very nice, but it had just a little bit too much soil in there, and it didn't allow the water to come in, especially in a time when it was extremely dry all summer. Quite a switch from a couple of years ago, but so it would be lowering that area, if that makes sense to you.
And where are you putting the wells?
The wells, again, they're the small PVC pipes, and they're in each of the wetland creation areas. So that north area and the central area both have a well in it, my understanding. I haven't actually seen them, but that's where they should have been placed.
Thanks.
Yep.
And is that well data part of the data that we have for the piezometers in the area now?
I don't know if we've even downloaded anything yet, have we? Nicole, do you know? And I think they just were installed. So over the long term, you know, we would have data that could be available. I don't know the specifics of the plan for those, but they're usually pretty small and pretty temporary monitoring devices, not long term.
Yeah, my understanding was that these would be separate. They're very localized in these small areas just to measure, you know, if we're getting saturation during the spring or if there's seasonal flooding. Because even a seasonally flooded area could meet the wetland criteria. So it doesn't have to necessarily look like what you're expecting it to look like. You know, it could be a wet meadow or seasonally flooded. But yeah, so I'm wondering if it would help to, I guess we could talk to Karen and see if she thinks it would be worthwhile doing one at the overflow swale to see if during a more normal precip year that there's some hydrology present. I don't know. It's the cheap.
I'll talk to her about that. I don't know if it would be necessary since the central area is so close to there, and you know there's a lot of similarities. If you could get the elevation similar to what it was originally planned, but I'll see if if that's necessary.
Good. Any other comments about this? I'm glad I asked the question. It's a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's kind of a good preface for Wetlands Workshop coming up.
It is absolutely right. It is. That and Victoria Shores and these kind of things are why we want to have that workshop. So thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Moving on.
Thank you. Yep.
Yep, thank you. Moving on to the Keller, Weir, and Phelan Outlet Operations Plan.
Yes, Brandon Barnes is here from BAR to walk us through this project now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tina.
Let me get, I'm going to stop Brad's. There we go.
Yeah, I was trying to stop myself, but I couldn't figure it out. So thank you for doing that. So
Sure.
all right, I'll turn it over to Brandon now. So
Hopefully that worked and you can see my screen now.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic. We will shift topics here to the Keller, Weir, and Phelan Outlet Operation Plan. And this is a good time to discuss this because this project is transitioning from out of the construction phase and really into the implementation phase in terms of operation and maintenance of these now modified structures. So what I'm planning to do here over the next several minutes is to provide maybe a brief or an abbreviated history here of the project. If you recall, this one began as part of the Beltline Resiliency Study. I will step through a short photo sequence of some of the construction photos. You can get a sense of what these structures look like. And then I'll slow down and provide a little bit more detail on the operation plan. And Eric and Dave put together a pretty cool video for you, I think, that kind of shows these structures in action. I do want to note too, as we get going through here, you do have a draft of the operation plan in the packet. It is in draft form right now. At this point, we're waiting on the final submittals from the contractor to come in before we wrap it up. So what's in the packet now is just the main text of that operation plan. There are several appendices, several hundred pages of appendices that get attached to that plan as well to provide additional documentation on the specific system components. So if you recall, several years ago, 3 or 4 now, this project, and by this project I mean specifically the active operation of the Keller Lake and the Phelan outlet structures, was a key component in the Beltline Resiliency Project. The image on the right here, the blue, is the drainage area really to the Phelan outlet structure. So this was the bottleneck that we were looking at, trying to figure out how we could more efficiently utilize the conveyance capacity in the tunnel during periods when that capacity was available. As we stepped through the resiliency study, these modifications were evaluated at a feasibility level as part of that study, and those results are still available on the website. This served really as the starting point for the final design of these structures, and really then informing the development of the operation plan that was eventually used for permitting and discussed with the DNR prior to construction and modifications of these structures. So just stepping through a brief photo sequence here. This is a pre-project photo here of the Keller Creek outlet. We're standing upstream and looking downstream. The other structure that was being modified was the 2 Phelan outlets from Lake Phelan. This one is the east structure. And so the left photograph shows kind of the trash rack, and under the water you can kind of make out the, let's see if I can get a pointer here, maybe that shows up. You can make out the low flow pipe that comes into the structure. The middle image is the weir inside the structure. That weir overtops, and in this particular structure discharges into a In this case, it's a 72-inch pipe that then connects downstream. In the background here of this picture right here, I'll just draw your attention. This is the wall where the new connections kind of connect in here. And so it was really fortunate for this project that this room was here. It made it such that making these new connections was relatively straightforward from a constructability perspective. And stepping through the photo sequence here of construction, this is the right in the middle of the modifications for the Keller Creek structure. This photo is right in the middle of construction where they have it dewatered just prior to reinstalling the new weirs. From a flood risk perspective and water management during construction, one of the things I find interesting is that it was done during the winter months, and although you can't make it out here, the water level upstream of that weir was right near the crest. The contractor was managing it to within a couple tenths of the crest to make sure they weren't increasing water levels upstream of the construction site. We'll fast forward here a couple of months. This is the site now post-construction on the lower left. It's the restored site. We're standing downstream looking back upstream. And then the upper right, we're also standing downstream looking upstream, but you can see one of the weirs, the controls for the weir structure that essentially raise and lower the crest. And in the foreground here, you have the control panel that's connected to each of the three adjustable weirs. And now this is on the other side. This is kind of a similar perspective to that pre-project conditions photo that I started off with. So we're standing upstream, we're looking downstream. And really from this perspective, the only difference you see is that there's a control bar here on the top that is attached to the weir crest that's used to raise and lower the weirs in the three bays. Moving south here to Lake Phalen, these are photographs during construction. So I pointed out the weir early in the presentation. We had a photo looking from the other side of this wall. Now we're on the outside. This is where they're cutting in the hole to knock out and connect that new pipe. In the middle structure here, they're putting a manhole. This is one of the 4 new gates that are installed. The gates can each be operated or lowered in this case to allow water to bypass that main outlet and discharge right into the tunnel. And then the photo on the right here, they're connecting a flared end section to the manhole here. This is the same manhole that's shown in the middle image here. Post-construction, this pipe here will be underwater. It'll be submerged. You won't be able to see that when you're standing on the shore. Look, fast forward here. Now we're standing, this photo on the left is standing on the top of this manhole and looking straight down. They have one of the weirs installed. In this particular image, you can see some water coming over the top of the weir. Water is from the lake, and this photo is up here. Water is flowing over the top of the weir and then into the pipe that's connected to the Phalen outlet structure. The photo on the right here, this is kind of standing on the shoreline looking back towards the structure. And so the big changes here at this particular structure are the 2 manholes on either side of the existing structure. And these 2 manholes, these are where the gates are located. Lake Phalen has 2 outlets, and at each outlet there is 2 new gates or manholes, and each of them has a gate within the manhole that can be operated. And so similar to Keller, this photo is a post-construction photo. Now the site is restored. We're standing a little bit further from the shoreline looking back towards the lake. The manhole on the left houses one of the gates. There's a pipe from the lake that conveys water. When the gate's lowered, water is allowed to discharge directly into the structure and then downstream. And then certainly here in the foreground is a control panel. This control panel then houses the controls that allow for operation of the gates. The gates can be operated in a number of ways. They can be operated on-site manually. They can be operated on-site using the control panels. They can also be operated from a secure computer at the district office or from a mobile phone app that gets installed on I think Eric and Dave's phones are the authorized users at this point. in particular, the interface or the control panel that Eric and Dave see when they go to operate the gates, either from the computer at the district office or from the phone on their app application, looks like this. At the top of the screen here are the gates on Keller channel. It's set up such that you're upstream looking downstream, so you're looking in the direction of water is flowing. Each weir has the ability to be operated independently, and with the control panel tracks the current crest elevation of the gate, and then it also appears as an input window, so it allows the user to specify the gate elevation that it should be moved to. So you can key in the elevation, you hit move, and then the gate starts moving, and the program shows the elevation of the gate as it's moving. So from the office, if it gets stuck and it doesn't reach that elevation, there's an alarm that goes off to let you know that there's something needs to be checked. On the right side here, then the program's also tracking the water level in the lake upstream of the gates here, so that as the gates are lowered, you can see from the control panel what the impact or change in the water levels are. Move this off the side here. On the lower half of the screen here, these are the 4 gates from Lake Phalen. So there's 2 on the west outlet and 2 on the east outlet. Similar to Keller, there's the crest elevation of the gate for each of the gates. There's the elevation that can be specified. So you tell the program where you want to move the gate. And then it's also tracking the water level upstream of the gates here for Lake Phalen. Now this is the control panel that allows for operating at the gates. The operation plan describes the steps or the checks that need to be done before you go and adjust the gates. And really the operation plan can really be simplified down into a couple of figures here. The operation plan or operation of the gates was developed based on the district stormwater model. This plan was submitted to and discussed with the DNR during the permitting process for this project. And it's developed based on a couple of different things. It considers the current lake level in the Phalen chain. It considers what time of year it is. And then it also considers how much rainfall is in the immediate forecast. And so what we'll do here is I'll walk through a hypothetical for how these figures are used to make decisions on whether or how the gate should be operated. So the first thing that we do is we look at where the water level is in the chain. And this figure here is showing the water level in Spoon Lake. In the orange shading up here, if the current water level in the lake is within 1 foot of the low home on the lake, then the gates on Keller can be lowered. The gates on Phalen can be open to draw water down to mitigate flood risk for that lower structure. In the tan areas here, this is the periods in early spring and late fall. During these periods here, the gates can be operated such that we're lowering water levels to approach that outlet elevation in the lake. The intent here during this period is to make sure that there's live storage available in the chain to store runoff from the snow melt that occurs in the spring. During the summer months, then here the gates are operated really if there is a forecasted rainfall that's greater than 3 inches. So during this period here, we're looking at both water levels and forecasted rainfall events. So if we walk through a hypothetical here in the lower right, this is a screenshot from the district's website. This is tracking water levels in Spoon Lake. And just about a month ago, water level in Spoon Lake spiked and we were about at an 859.0. So an 859.0 in early September, you'd enter this plot here and you fall in the green area. So if you're in the green area here, then you go to the next plot in the operation plan. So the next plot in the operation plan, you look at Spoon Lake level and we're at 859. And we check what the forecasted rainfall depth is. So we go and we look at what the forecasted rainfall depth is here. In this case, I'm showing an example from that mid-September period here. Or I guess this is from October, but that shows a forecasted rainfall in the order of 3/100ths of an inch. So because there's only 3/100ths of an inch, that's less than 3 inches. There's no need to operate the gates. Continue to monitor. But for the sake of this example, let's just assume that the forecast, there was a big storm coming and that there was 3.3 inches of rainfall was in the forecast. So in this scenario, the lake level's at 859. We enter the plot here just above 3 and we find out that we're in this blue area here. So that tells the operator for the gates to set the Keller Weir level at 857.5 and to open 2 of the gates leaving Lake Phalen. The way that this plan was set up was such that we wanted to try to minimize the amount of times and the amount of gates that we would have to operate. Essentially, we want to try to avoid large fluctuations in the lake levels as a result of simply mitigating flood risk on the lakes. So what I want to do here is pause, and I'm going to hit escape on my slideshow for a moment. I think you're still seeing my screen. I want to try to play a video that Eric created. What this video is going to show is Eric and Dave were on site and they were just stepping through that hypothetical example where they were modifying the gates on Keller and Phalen. And so this starts here by showing what Eric is looking at on the control panel. I'm just going to hit play. Hopefully this starts to go. Maybe I had, oh, there it goes. Are you seeing it go? Okay, so this is showing now that the cell phone app on the right, you can see his mouse on his cell phone is matching the mouse on the screen. He keyed in an elevation on the gates, and now you're seeing those gates on the control panel lower. And then this is what Dave is observing in the field. The gates for the three weirs are lowering. We're watching this a little bit fast forward. Dave doesn't really walk that fast on site. Here now it got sent back to Eric. So Eric is adjusting those crests again and now raising the gates. And here, starting on the left side, those gates are going to start raising, and you'll see the water flow will slow down. This is going to go to Phalen. Now he's lowering the Phalen gate all the way down, so it's fully opening. Here you see one of the gates. This is looking from the manhole down into that manhole, so water's flowing from the top of the screen south. And now this is on inside of the structure. You can see the water flowing out and then down into the out of Phalen. After this, if you are interested in this video, Eric and Tina have this video. It's even better with volume. You can hear the background noise. It sounds like chipmunks, but it is kind of cool to see the gates operating. And it provides a sense for the ease of operation that staff have to make those adjustments. I'm going to bring this back here, and I can just see there. I might. Uh-oh. All right. Well, I just had a what's next slide here at the end here. That is, it's the same one that's in your packet. What's next really is finalizing the operation plan. We just received final submittals from the contractor in terms of information that's needed to inform routine maintenance for some of the remaining components. It's then moving into the implementation phase for that operation plan. And then the last step is to continue to look for and complete flood risk mitigation studies in upstream parts of the watershed. As you might recall, during that resiliency study, we had a conversation about sequencing of projects. And this project was at the downstream end of everything we were looking at. And so now that this one is implemented, you can move to that next step and start looking at additional projects. So with that, if there are questions, that is the end of the slides that I have. I won't fast forward through them all here.
Okay, does anybody but me have questions?
Now, I was curious, Brandon, great presentation. Is there a way to put the video on like our website so people can see this modern way of managing the water flow? Is that part of the plan?
Yeah, I think we could include that on our project page. I think that would be interesting for people to see. Mhm.
I had a couple of questions. We picked 3-inch rainfall prediction. Do we have any information on what the accuracy of those kind of forecasts are? And the other part of my question is, before we were using 2 inches, why do we move to 3?
Yeah, those are good questions. So the intent of picking the rainfall depth was such that we wanted to pick a depth where we were mitigating flood risk for homes on the Salem chain, but that we were also limiting the number of times or the amount of times that district staff would have to make adjustments to those lakes or to those outlets. And so by doing that or by selecting that larger rainfall depth, it reduced the amount of times that we would have to adjust that. Now, the reason that we switched from 2 to 3, to get at the first part of your question there, Larry, is that I believe the 2 you're referring to, we were using during the resiliency study. The configuration of what the modifications to these outlets looked like changed between the resiliency study and final design. So during final design, when we were discussing what types of materials were available, what would be less impactful in terms of actually being able to construct, we changed the configuration of what this looked like. So for an example, for the Keller weirs, in the resiliency study, it had them getting longer instead of being able to, and then here we kept them the same size, but we changed how low they could be adjusted. And so we changed that during the final design, and then you in turn could move from 2 inches to 3 inches and not lose any benefit.
How long does it take? What's the residence time? Because we talked about this before. When you lower the Keller weir, how long does it take that to have an effect on the chain going all the way down to the foot of Salem?
So, I mean, well, you saw in the video, as soon as you lower it, you're going to see water moving through the weir. And so, the effect is you're going to start creating live storage as soon as those gates are lowered or those gates are open. As part of the operation plan, the number of gates that get open and the adjustment of the weirs were such that we were targeting a drawdown to the normal water level within a 24-hour period, right? So if you only open, for Phelan, say if you only open one gate, it's going to take longer to create that drawdown, to create that live storage, compared to if you opened all 4 of them. And so that's where we were trying to draw down to that normal level by the time the rainfall event started.
Yeah. Yeah, got it.
I had a follow-up question. I really like how you broke down graphically and per rain level. Could you help me understand if rate of the lake level increase was part of considerations, knowing how much water flows into that area? Would there be like a rate of lake level change that would trigger response outside of just the rain and the current lake level?
So the rate, I'm not sure I'm quite following here. The rate change in and of itself doesn't necessarily determine a change in the number of outlets or the elevation that the weir is set to. And that's, for this particular system, it's volume driven. And so that's where we were tying that back to rainfall in particular, right? So for an example is, if you get 2 inches over 1 hour, you're going to have a certain volume that's going to come in. It might come quicker because it's over a shorter period of time, but it's the same. It's a similar amount of volume as, say, if you get a similar rainfall over a longer duration. So if you get those 2 inches over, say, 6 or 12 hours, it's going to be a similar volume that's going to come into the chain, and it's that volume that's going to inform how we adjust those outlets.
So that part makes sense to me. I was trying to piece together, it's not just rainfall that changes the lake level from what I recall. And maybe I'm mistaken, like, so it's ground saturation, it's flow of the groundwater, it's all these different things. And so if you get 2 inches of rain in 2 hours in a typical environment, I'd assume that math makes a lot of sense in my head. But if it's a unique situation where that 2 inches actually amounts to a larger change in lake level because of other variables, I was curious if that use case was considered.
Yeah, so the basis that this for the graphics was based on I'm going to call it average. So not wet, not dry, antecedent condition. And that's what the basis was for those plots was set to. I think what the uncertainty there, I think that you're pointing at, it can be accounted for then in that upper limit, right? So in that figure, that graphic that shows where those lake levels are, we're going to try to operate it such that we're going to minimize the operation that we can up until a certain point. Once it gets close to that home and there's capacity there, there's that kind of relief where, okay, everything's going to be open and we're going to move as much as we can through the system to try to utilize the capacity that is there.
I noticed in November, you're going to be reporting on a relook at the homes that are in danger of flooding. So will the operation of these be a part of that discussion then?
Say that again, Larry. Will the what?
Yeah. In the projects and program status report, the first 2 or 3 of them say that we're going to have a relook in November at what homes and how many of them are actually impacted during flooding. And will that discussion include how we would operate the Salem and Keller weirs during those situations?
So you're referring to the Ames Lake and
Yeah.
Coleman Creek studies. Yeah. So those, I mean, when it talks about that in that project status report, that's in regards to the surveying that we did to see which ones are in the, but Brandon, maybe you can make the connection to this project as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. So yes, I think the short answer, Larry, is yes. Those are feasibility studies that are kind of the next ones in the sequence, right? So those feasibility studies are looking at flood risk mitigation in areas that aren't immediately adjacent to the chain. But as they're changing conveyance or changing the system in those areas, they're doing so with the assumption that these outlets are in place and accounting for this operation plan for those structures.
I have a question.
Too.
Okay.
Cliff?
Yeah, me?
Yeah.
Okay. Brandon, I was thinking about, I like the operation plan, but there are probably going to be some extenuating of circumstances down the road where we do have exceedingly wet conditions and we're looking at a large rainfall event. And I'm thinking that, yeah, we'll operate according to the chart, but as those conditions continue or the lake doesn't respond as quickly as we hoped it would, the system would allow us to just keep the gates open, or actually even maybe open another gate to return the lake systems to normal. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we'll need to continue to look at, either on a, I say annual basis, but as we begin to operate this, right? So I think what you're pointing at, Cliff, is right now that this plan is developed based on the drawdown that we're seeing with a model. Whereas once we start to operate this, we're going to have new data points that will be able to inform, okay, what number of gates do you open? Is that right? The advanced notification that is needed, is that set right? And so as these gates are operating, we collect that data point, those data points, we'll have to revisit these graphics and update them accordingly.
Okay, good.
I wanted to support Cliff because he asked a question very similar to what ensuring that there's some sort of mechanism that allows the judgment of our experts to come in and make a change in those unique extreme. I just want to make sure that that's how I interpreted Cliff's question, and definitely something I'd align to as you're learning anyway. You might as well have that clause there.
Right.
Yeah, that's something that we can, it sounds like it's a good comment on that draft plan, that there should be a statement such there, kind of an overriding one at the end, that at the direction of the board or whoever, the gates can be returned to
consult with
in
consult with the administrator and the district engineer or something like that.
Yeah.
We can include something to that effect. Absolutely.
That's a good point. Diane has her hand up too.
Diane?
Oh, you're on mute, Diane.
See, sorry about that. Partially answered my question because I wanted to know what the evaluation and amendment process would be to the operation plan. It's brand new. You've got a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that are sort of predictable, sort of not. And as you said, Brandon, you're going to have new data points every time you operate it. So what I wondered is if you're going to relook at the operation plan every time, or wait until you have several times, or I just want some kind of a formal commitment to take a look at all of what you learn, because it is new and there's so many moving parts, and adjust the plan or recommend adjusting it as needed. There's only so much you can do with these kinds of things like rainfall and various lake levels and integrating them all together with your expertise, but there will need to be some formal evaluations of this so that we can keep a nimble operating plan going forward.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Another question, Brandon, you talk about using the predicted rainfall rates. Is there a specific site that you're going to use for that prediction? And secondly, as we've seen with storms in the last couple of years, there may be a prediction, but there's always some area where the storm seems to be training and you get much more than you anticipated. So how are we going to respond to the situation where we only anticipated 1 inch, but we got 4? And so we're not responding to a prediction, but we're responding to an actual fact. So would the staff be authorized in that situation to, if they find that in the Salem watershed, we actually did get substantially more than, we got 3 inches or more when we're only anticipating 1, could they institute this response?
Yeah, I think we could within the context of the plan. And one of the things that I think allows that is that trigger at that upper elevation. There's that elevation when once water gets to that level, you can open it up. And I think that's what you're getting to with that example is you lower Keller, open up all the Phelan ones, and that this plan gives that flexibility at that threshold to do that. The other example, and the one that we talked about with the DNR during permitting, is the flip side of that, where it says you're getting 3, but storms break up and you only get 1 or something less. And then in that example, you conceivably could open the gates and the lake level could fall slightly below the outlet, and you go, oh, okay, we're going to close the gates. And that was something that we looked at with, base flows coming through. There may be a period of time on the order of hours or days where it takes for the lakes and that base flow to fill back up and come through. And so that's the flip side there that could happen as well. The rainfall gauge that's referenced in the plan, I believe, is there's a gauge in Little Canada that has a 48-hour advanced forecast that is updated hourly. And so that's why we selected that link and referenced that in the plan. So there's one directly in the watershed.
Larry, you're on mute.
Okay, any other comments? Took me a while to find my mute with all the mutes up here. Any other comments about this? I'm sure we'll be hearing about it as time goes on and we get more experience with it. That's really cool. Congratulations to everybody for getting this done. It's really important. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a unique system for a watershed to operate. So we look forward to definitely reporting back to you on how it's going. And like Diane was talking about, how we're reevaluating our process as we go. So.
Right. Sounds good.
And thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Brandon. Yep. It's good to see you again, by the way.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Okay, next we have the administrator's report.
Yeah, so I have my meetings attended and upcoming meetings, if there's any questions about any of that.
I did have a question on the Metro INET meeting.
Yeah.
And we had some concerns a while back about potential changes in that system and the personnel. What's the status right now?
So the meeting that we had this month was to officially hire an executive director for Metro INET under the JPA. So we have an executive director now, and that's our first step. So that executive director will come in and be evaluating staffing and also be looking at where they're going to be officing out of in the near future. I think they'll have to be potentially be leaving Roseville. Now, COVID kind of changed some of that plan because they haven't been using the city hasn't been using the space or needing the additional space as much.
Right.
But originally it was thought that they would need to leave the Roseville city campus. So those will be some of the things that they'll be moving ahead with. But as far as budgeting for Metro INET in 2022, what we had anticipated is holding firm for 2022, and then this new executive director will be evaluating for the 2023. Anything else about any of the meetings or the upcoming meetings as well?
I see the mod meeting has gone virtual.
It is, yes. So the mod meeting will be all virtual. And I don't know exactly how many days. It probably won't be 1 through 4 again, like it would be in person. So more information to come, I would guess, over the next month. But as for now, it's planned to go virtual. They are going to do it a little different than they did last year. They're not going to use the same platform that they used last year. They'll be using Zoom. So it'll be live presentations instead of recorded. And so you'll have the ability to ask live questions as well, right to the presenter, which I think will be nice. And then they can be recorded as well. So they're putting that all together, but
I think we just leave our meeting moved so
Right.
we can better enjoy the mod meeting and not have to worry about having a board meeting until the next week.
yeah, just as a reminder for those that might not remember, we did move our December meeting to the 8th from the 1st because of mod. But yeah, I agree. I think it's good to keep it that way.
I think so.
Good. Under ongoing updates, Ramsey County permitting, as I mentioned in here, they're working on that full agreement now. That's overarching agreement that will go to the board. And we're connecting with them on our 2022 projects as well. So we're moving right along in that, and I don't have any concerns about that being in place for all of 2022 on our district projects on any Ramsey County property. Lake level stations, those are mostly all in place. We're working now on getting some of the data cleaned up still from different events that occurred both through winter and into spring. And then we're talking about how we want to represent that data in winter coming up. The thought is that we would actually disengage the data from the chart and leave it blank so that it doesn't show those anomalies and we don't have to clean them out. So pretty much like ice in to ice out, we'll take it offline, and there'll be some sort of representation on the graph to tell people that's why there's no data. But that is our plan at this point. But we are still going back. It's hard because this is kind of the end of field season. So the people that are normally working on this data to get that cleaned up are really trying to wrap up their field season work before snow flies. So I think once they're in the office more, we'll be able to get that data cleaned up and represented on the graphs from this last year as well. PFCs and alum use, I don't have really any update at this point other than to say it's still on our radar, and we will be bringing that to a future meeting. And then the Victoria Shores development, as Andy mentioned in our visitor comments, the EAW is out for review and comment by agency and the public. We have until November 4th to do our review. Typically, we would review an EAW like that. That's in our watershed. We'll be looking for things similar to what we sent them in the letter that you authorized me to send. So I know maybe there is concern about would the board be able to see that letter or not. We won't have a board meeting again before we would have that. Actually, I don't know what.
Actually, we do. Our board meeting is on the 3rd.
Oh, okay. So if you wanted me to, I could bring that comment letter to you on the 3rd and send it to them on the 4th. Or if you're comfortable with it, staff would normally just do a staff comment letter and send that in for EAW comments, and I can just include that in the packet. So
yeah, that would be my opinion at this point, if you go ahead and send it, so we're not just right up against the deadline, but yeah. At least we know what's going on at that point.
Yeah, and I think the EAW comment letters are fairly straightforward. We'll review it in comparison to our district rules and our policies, and then also with the direction that the board gave us when we submitted the letter to Roseville about the sensitivity of impact to wetlands. And as he mentioned, we'll be clear. We won't necessarily comment on it like a permit review, but we'll say, what the permit regulations are that they need to meet for that permit, because plans change and what we see for them for a permit review will likely be very different than we saw last time. So we're not commenting necessarily on the permit review, but just in general, what our rules and regulations would say about a development there. And then the last thing I have in my report is the Wetlands Workshop, and that was just to say that October 25th was the date that was best for the board members that I heard from, as well as staff, and that we'll be preparing to send you materials ahead of the meeting. A lot of background information, as well as some food for thought, I would say, some questions maybe that the board can discuss based on that information that we give you for background. And based on the things that I had an outline, and I should have pulled that up. I didn't pull that up, but the outline that I had submitted, I think back in July or August, we'll follow that, as well as some of the questions that came out of our discussion this evening as well, that I've made notes of.
The sooner we can get the information, even if we get it in a little bit at a time, I think it would help a lot, so that we have a chance to look through it and try to understand it, or at least know what it says, to better prepare for it. Because I have a feeling it's going to be fairly complicated, given our discussion today. So
Yeah.
whenever you have something ready, send it to us and we can digest it.
Sounds good.
Tina, what time would that be at? Or and is it going to be virtual, I assume?
Those are good questions. Larry, did you want to plan for it to be virtual?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to, unless other board members feel that getting together, particularly since we have the mask rule in the facility. Yeah, Pam. You're on mute, Pam. Pam, you're on mute.
Sorry. So did you say October 25th?
Yes, October 25th.
Okay, I'm sorry, I totally missed some planning here because I'm hosting somebody from Walter Reed all day that day, and whatever we're planning, I likely won't be able to attend. And well, maybe I'm not really sure yet. I'm still planning her agenda, but I think that I take her to dinner that night and the whole day will be consumed. So my apologies. I'm sorry, I missed some emails.
Yeah, there was a doodle, and I thought you had responded, but
oh,
I did change.
I don't remember. I don't know. I was out for a while too, so I am sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
I missed this. I'm sorry.
So we were planning, or I was planning for in the evening, a similar as a board meeting. Is that correct for Larry?
Yes, that was actually going to be my question, but I would say similar to the board meeting. Either we started the workshops at 6 o'clock, and I don't know if that's an issue for somebody. 6:30 is fine as far as I'm concerned. Sorry. So 6:30. Everybody okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So 6:30 on the 25th.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I see on the 25th, I do have that watershed district meeting on there. Somehow I did say I was going to go, but I'm sorry I missed it. I just, I messed up.
No.
Well, we'll record it.
Yeah, that's
good. That's fine. That works for me. Yeah. And my apologies again.
Yeah. You can take your cell phone with you to dinner.
Log on to the
wetlands. Okay, anything else on the administrator's report? Now we have projects and program status reports. A couple of things in there that I had. On the inspection, you asked 2 questions about whether or not the miscellaneous category was okay, and how we would recommend that you rate the problems in the district. And since I'm talking, I'm just going to give my point of view, and then we can go to the other members. For me, the miscellaneous category is just fine for the other things, as long as we know what's in it. I would vote for the 1 to 5 scale rather than just go or no go. The 1 to 5 to me would be something on the order of something must be done now, something must be done soon. We can wait for the CIP, we can wait for other people to do it, or we can wait forever. That's where I would see more of an in-depth look at things. So other board members.
Just to be clear, we're on page, well, on mine, it's at 116 on our,
Sorry
and it's
about that.
district inspection standardization topic. Just wanna make sure.
I had similar answers as you, Larry. I was thinking that miscellaneous makes sense. Agreed, totally. Figure out, just make sure we know what's in it. I was going to propose, I like the 1 to 5 much more. The goal is to help stratify risk and understanding, right? So my preference is generally on rating systems to not have a middle one. So I prefer a 1 to 4 rating because then it forces somebody to decide.
Right.
But that would be the only difference that I had in recommendations.
I support that approach as well.
Okay, Diane, thumbs up. Thank you.
Okay,
Did you have
right.
any comments on that? I just jumped right into my notes, I guess. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's helpful. I appreciate you, making those comments. As we mentioned, we're going to try to give more and more in-depth to the minute updates as we come to board meetings. So you can kind of maybe be a little bit more engaged in the development of things such as this, rather than us just going away, developing it, and coming back and presenting what we've developed. So we'll try this out, but this is helpful, and I appreciate your input.
I got really excited when I saw questions in there, honestly. It gave me a pause to think.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I'm a glutton for punishment. But
Somebody wants to know what I think.
I did want to encourage, I always like starting simple and then getting more complex. It's just generally my preference. So I really like this approach, and hopefully you'll get the feedback you need.
Great, thank you. Diane?
Well, and to keep with my general theme, whenever we're setting up something new, I'd like to see it after a time, and maybe you can show some pictures and say, we gave this a 4, we gave this a 1. And
Yeah.
And I like it too, for the reasons that Larry articulated. This has budget impact, and staff resource impact. If something needs to be done now, or if it could be done in the CIP project, or it's on a watch list or something. So I really like that. I think it helps us prioritize.
Great, thank you.
I had a question on a different subject. On the Roseville Willow Pond CMAX system, I know it kind of been out of touch for a couple months, but it just seems like that's taken an awful long time to get finished up, to be operating. It seems like something happened here. Somebody dropped the ball, or what really happened to make this delay so much?
Well,
Brad?
There's a variety of things that happened, and I think there was some bit of a ball drop, and it was really, we knew there were some issues last year with COVID. We also knew that we had a little bit of a availability of time because we wouldn't be monitoring anyway. So we kind of pushed it off. And even as we moved into this year without the rain, it was kind of not in the front of our mind until it actually started raining, and we go, oh, darn it, we haven't fixed this yet. And so, yes, there was a little bit of ball dropping. It reminded me last month when we talked about it, Dave and I talked about it after the meeting, as well as we need to get on this. And so got together with Chris Bonnick right away, and Dave and Chris really got all the parties together. So I think we've got a plan now to move forward. you know, there is a piece that we were waiting for a delivery on that's far back ordered. So that factors into that. But, you know, I think we take more of the responsibility of dropping the ball on it rather than, you know, trying to take advantage of the time when it wasn't used, and all of a sudden it caught us when we needed it. But we'll have it set up for next spring.
Great.
Yeah, got a good path forward.
Oh, Larry, you're on mute.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments? I've got a question on the communications program. Lauren's planning on emailing other government organizations. Can you make sure that she keeps the board informed as to what she's telling them in case we run into one of them, which we do, and we're not surprised by what they've gotten from us?
Sure. Yeah, I can have her copy you on those correspondence as well. Yep.
She has some videos she's making. Where are the videos going to go? You know?
Well, we have on our YouTube channel when and they also go on our social media. And then they would be linked from our website, I'm assuming, to our YouTube channel. So our YouTube would be one of our prime places to see videos that we produce. And there's a number of them on there right now besides the board meeting videos.
Okay.
I had a question on the new technology summary, which I really like that section. On this particular algae bloom detector, I didn't see any mention of how lake level variations impacted the ability of or the function of that. Did you consider that variation and how it played a role in the performance of this new technology?
You know, I'd have to go back and look at the information. A lot of what happens in these reports are us just summarizing and reporting back. So it's not really us evaluating. It's kind of us throwing out the manufacturer's claims and, you know, testing whether there's you know, validity to maybe take another step with having us test it or try it in a situation. So I think my main concern with this particular device is less about the lake level, but more about the things that are in the way. You know, you can't see around rocks, it can't see around debris. So they're quite expensive, and to put so many of these to be able to reach all the angles, and then it's an interesting technology for sure. And if it could be further developed, it might be a great application for it to manage some of these things.
Have you had any discussions with any of the cities that have had problems with algae blooms as to whether they're interested in pursuing this?
Have not.
Not yet. I mean, this is something that I would certainly send to them as an option to consider, and its potential to come back with Kashara and doing a study and research to try it. But yeah, we haven't reached out yet. No. The first step would be to share it with you, and then we would share it with our cities as well.
Yeah, my thought was
Val, if
that
you would like us to look into that lake level portion of it, we can at least dig a little bit deeper or call the manufacturer and see how they respond. So.
I was just poking because at least in the write-up, it gave me an impression that it was a really promising technology, and so it just made me want to ask additional questions.
Sure.
The manufacturers make all kinds of claims. They aren't necessarily good for the real world. But my thought was that this technology might be good for a lake that doesn't have a lot of surface use. You know, like I was thinking of the Round Lake in Little Canada. There were some issues with algae blooms a few years ago, and things like that. I think it'd be feasible. But then again, if it's not a lot of public use, do you want to put this amount of money into trying to improve it that much? I don't know. It's hard to say.
All right. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on the project or program status reports? Okay, we'll go around and manage your comments in next month's meeting. So we will start with Diane.
I don't have anything additional, thanks.
Good for you. Pam.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay, Cliff.
I'd just like to add that I've been impressed. It seems like the staff are still doing things like pre-COVID, and it just impresses me that they can still manage to accomplish as much, and the consultants too, manage to accomplish as much as they are with the difficult situations. So I just like to express my thanks.
Thanks, Cliff.
Now,
The only comment I had is I hope Deb had a good lunch. Sorry I missed it, but
Yeah.
so hopefully you gave her a good send off.
Oh, it's tomorrow. We'll
it's
tell her
tomorrow?
tomorrow.
Well, then
Yeah.
I will miss it tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get away from working hours.
Yeah. I definitely will pass along all your comments for those that can't be there. So
yeah, Diane, did you have a comment? Your hand was up. Okay.
I think she clapped.
Spurious. And from my point of view, we're gonna try to get Phil to talk to us. And we had a couple of, I presume we're gonna have a report on the update of the information due to the surveys from what the reports said. Was there anything else, Tina, that you had written down?
So I have the art policy and the Victoria Shores DAW comment letter will be included. Yeah, I'll talk to Philip if he's available in November. I'll check with him on that. And then yes, the website presentation, I think was what you were just referencing, correct?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
That's all it takes. We're out of here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Bye
Take
now.
care.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.